Hi again. Here we are to continue working on our JavaScript API project, and we'll be using the Giphy API. And to use the Giphy API, you'll need to make an account and get an API key. So how do you do that? Well, I'm going to go to the web here, and I'm going to search for Giphy API. Okay, and that should take us to the developers.giphy.com. And I'll click the link here, and there's this is developers, and it's get started building with the power of Giphy, right? It's got all this stuff, and then we've got docs here, and then we've got the dashboard. So we can go to the docs and we'll consult those later, but for right now what we really need is we need to go to the dashboard. So I already have an account, so it kind of logs me in automatically, but if you don't have an account, it'll ask you to create one and then log into it. And when you've done that, when you click on the dashboard, it should take you here, and you'll need to get an API key, right? So they'll give you a key. So let's copy that, right? And there's a few other things you can do here, like you can create an app and stuff, but really for what we're doing here is we just need this key, okay? So we're going to copy that, and we're going to put it into our document here. And maybe I'll say const API key. Now, there is, some issues here that if we put anything into our HTML source code, then someone will be able to read it, right? So if we really need to keep this key secret, then we'll have to figure out another method, right? For right now, for what we're doing, this will be fine. And I think that Giphy API is not super critical. They don't charge money. Your credit card isn't connected to it. So if someone steals our API, the only thing they're going to do is be able to, download GIFs, or is it GIF, right? So they'll just be able to download GIFs. So, and you can always change your API if someone takes your key, right? So you can change it. So for right now, this will be fine for us. And later, maybe we can discuss ways to work with this, but essentially to really hide that, it'll have to be on a server, okay? But for what we're doing, I think that this is okay. And in a lot of ways, I think they kind of, they would prefer that people just download as many GIFs as possible, right? So anyway, so we've got our API key here. And now let's go take a look at their docs, and we'll see how to use it, right? So I'm going to go back to the Giphy site and go to the docs here. And they give us a few things. They give us, SDK overview. They give us Giphy API quick start guide. They have an SDK. So SDK stands for Software Developer Kit. It's probably usually it's like a bunch of software that all works together, right? So you download the kit, and they give you a bunch of libraries and maybe a framework and some other stuff, and then you can use that to get started with their system, right? So with iOS, they probably give you a bunch of code that runs on iOS, or they give you some Android code, right? We don't need any of that because we're just making a simple web app. So we're going to go down to the API section down here. And they give us a whole list of stuff, but probably getting started guide is our best bet. So let's start there. Hey, that's a nice GIF. And let's go to the quick start, right? So here we are. So it says, hey, before you get started, you have to obtain an API key. So check, we got that, right? And then they're like, don't worry, it's free. You can change your app name at any time. We're not even going to create an app. We're just going to search with the API key, right? So let's see, implementing a search, right? So Giphy returns most of the relevant GIFs and stickers based on a user's search query or category specification. Users can even find GIFs and stickers using emoji. Oh, great. To search, to add search to your app, head to the endpoint, search endpoint. So I think that's what we want there, right? To see what this should look like, you can go here, right? So that's kind of giving us a sample right there. And then if we go to the search endpoint, they kind of give us this api.giphy.com v1 GIFs search, right? And then it says API key is a request parameter, so we'll need to include that. And then we can also include Q, which is a string. This is required, right? So these two are required. And we can give it, some letters or characters or words that we're searching for. And then they give us a bunch of optional parameters like limit and offset and rating and random ID string, right? And then they give us an example, response. So they should give us, some data, pagination, and meta, right? And trending endpoint. So they give us a couple of these. So let's give this a try, right? So I'm going to go copy this search thing here, right? And we'll go into our, actually, I think we can even just use this in the browser, right? Why don't we do this? Why don't we say, let's give it a try. So this is API key. So I'll make a new tab, and I'm going to paste this in front of the HTTPS : / and then it'll be API Giphy.com v1 GIF search. And then what I'm going to do is put the question mark, and this is where the query string begins. So I'll put the question mark there, and we need to include the API key. So I'm going to say question mark API key equals, and now I'll have to go get my API key. And we don't have to include the quotation marks around this, so that's not needed, but I'll get this API key, and then I'll put it here. Okay, so I'll just paste it, and the cursor's at the end of the line there. And if I want to add another parameter, I'll put the ampersand, and then my other parameter here is going to be it's going to be Q, and then I'll include a string, right? So Q is here, so I'll put let me go back in here, go to the end of the line there after the ampersand. We'll do Q equals, and then we'll search for cats again, right? And then there's the results. Okay, so that was like a little weird to type it in there. So we're not actually going to type our URL in there, but if this worked, then it'll work anywhere. But this is essentially the data that they give us, right? This isn't formatted as nicely as we saw it in the console, but it's still the same data. And actually, we could copy all this, and I wonder if I can just do select all. There we go, right? And if we Google up, am I Googling Google? Is that a thing, right? Let's Google up JSON formatter. So what I think they've given me is JSON data, but it's not formatted very well, so it's hard to read. So I'm going to go look up the JSON formatting tool, and I can look at the formatter validator here. And if I paste some JSON into the field here and then click the process button, it'll give me some formatted output. So this is the same thing that we saw in the first video, right? So we have an object, and at the top level, I don't know why that's not showing now. Let me see here. Let me refresh it and do it again. My JSON formatter's not cooperating, and I'm getting the beach ball here. Let's see. Oh yeah, there we go, right? So, so we got data. Data is an array, and then this is one of those data objects, right? So it's got type as GIF and slug and source, and there's images, and then you got downsized large image, fixed height small still, or original, fixed height downsampled, right? So these are all of those images that we saw in that original file, right? So so that's pretty good, right? So we've got that all working. Let's close the formatter there. And this address right here, we can just copy it out of there. So if we know that this is working, like we've given it a quick test there, so that's kind of like, what do they call that? A sanity check, right? So we kind of know it works. Let's copy it, and we can paste it into our code, right? So our URL is going to look something like this, right? But let's format this like a little better so it's a little easier to use. So I'm going to say const, let's call it path, and I'm going to put the backtick here, and then I'll put the other one at the end here, right? And we've got the API key in a variable, so I'm going to take that, and where it says API key equals, all of these characters up unto the ampersand are the API key, so I'm going to remove those and replace them with a $, and the curly brackets, and then I can insert this API variable here, right? And then our search query will come from the input field over here, right? So we'll get it out of there in a minute, right? But for right now, why don't we, just for testing, we could say const, q equals, cats or something, right? And then this q right here will replace the query at the end of this string, right? So I'll take the cats out of there, replace it with $Q. Oops, wait, I missed a curly brace, right? Okay, and there we go. So now we're in pretty good shape to start our project. Oops, wait, I misspelled this thing too. Now we're in great shape. Okay, so anyway, so that gets us started. We've got our API key. We've figured out the endpoint that we need to target. We're able to insert into the endpoint values that we need to change, right? So potentially we need to change the API key, or we need to change the query parameter, right? And then in the next video, we'll talk about how to actually make a request, okay? So thanks for watching.